In the name of the one holy and undivided Trinity. Amen.
Amen.
Please have a seat. Lovely to see you on this Feast of the Epiphany, transferred. It's a lovely day to celebrate. Let's talk a little bit about context and understanding of the three other readings we get today on the Epiphany. We're very familiar with that image of the wise men coming, and it never specifies three, by the way. There's an indeterminate number of wise men who come to visit this child. And then we get these three readings to support and buttress this story and influence it. What's happening there? In this mix of the ordinary and the extraordinary. The passage from the anthology that is called the Book of Isaiah comes from a group of people in the early period of Persian rule, roughly 6th century BCE. The people of Israel have just endured a severe period of exile in Babylon and are now adjusting to being under Persian rule. Great expectations have been laid upon this shift in leadership, which did have some benefits for them. They were better off under Persian rule. But it certainly did not mean all that they had hoped about return and about safety. The notes to the New Revised Standard Version say, the disappointment of expectations aroused by the conquest of Cyrus has led to a resurgence of non-Yahwistic religious practices and deep religious, social, and economic divisions within the Judean community. Attention is directed increasingly away from an unsatisfactory present to the projection of a future intervention of God in judgment and salvation, and an apocalyptic vision of a purified people and Jerusalem as the religious capital of the world. And we hear that today in this reading about what it will be like when everyone is gathered beautifully together again. As a brief aside, it's not about the Messiah, this vision. Psalm 72 is a royal psalm about the Davidic king and the dynasty. It might be a coronation psalm, we think. It outlines the kind of kingship that will be in place when a truly holy person is on the throne. They were yearning for a king, and this is the refrain that occurs again and again in the psalm, that will give the poor justice and will give the needy deliverance. And literally in the psalm, who will crush the oppressor. This is a psalm sung by people who remembered being slaves, who were dreaming of a new kind of rule. A psalm sung by people who have not yet had their own land, who have always worked other people's lands, and who have been moving and moving and moving. Again, not directly a prophecy about the Messiah. The epistle today is a letter written by someone who had witnessed great persecution for the cause of the Jesus movement. And this is a contested letter, one where there is a scholarly disagreement about whether or not it was truly Paul who wrote it. The majority of scholars say no. We do know, however, that that this person had experienced and witnessed suffering on behalf of their alliance with the new movement, and were at least aware of Paul's imprisonment on its behalf. That imprisonment looked just to those who were doing the sentencing, and looked unjust to this community who was being sentenced. One thing we might immediately observe about each of these texts that have been chosen to influence our understanding of what happens at the Epiphany is that they're each written from below. By this, I mean that none of them are written by the people in power, even though each of them is a story about power. They're not written by the conquerors, by the Persians. They're not written by the king or by the judge who sentenced Paul. They're people looking up from below. People in danger. People in hiding. People who have been punished. And they're common people. No one writing any of today's readings was a remarkable person. You can't distinguish them from any other person on those ancient streets. I think one of the things iconography has done is made us think that people in the past, sometimes we get this visual image that they were walking around glowing, so you could tell which of them were saints. But you couldn't. They just looked like people. Common people being ruled by outsiders. Common people wishing life wasn't so hard on them. Common prisoners. And in our last reading, a common baby, born to very poor parents. The Feast of the Epiphany is not about a magic moment where a glowing hero shows up, one that's immediately recognizable to everyone as a special person. But the Epiphany is about a magic moment when we change. When we can look at the commonest person and the commonest phenomenon, the exact same boring street we've lived on for 20 years, the story of our own parents and our own lives, and start to understand them as having deep meaning and great import as part of the story of God. And when we can think about our world as having profound meaning, especially in those little hidden pockets of people who are displaced, people who work other people's land, common prisoners, and babies born into poverty. Because we have been shown by pretty reliable testimony that those are likely sources of divine revelation. I wonder if we can think together of a place in the world right now where people have been displaced and have been tempted with the possibility of return, where they are experiencing great hope and great frustration in equal measure. So I think they are waiting for our eyes to change, to be able to read their lives as part of the great story of God and God's people. Or at least for us to consider the possibility of their great importance, because it has happened before. I wonder if there is a place in the world where people yearn for a great ruler whose first priority is the poor and the needy. Because that place, I think, is waiting for us and for our eyes to change. I wonder if there is a place in the world where there are prisoners, people tossed in jail for a reason they did not find just. That place is waiting for us and for our eyes to change. These places, and many others, including the everyday data of our own lives, are waiting for an epiphany people. Sometimes we talk about ourselves as an Easter people, and that's appropriate. The resurrection happens year-round. But epiphany people are those who are willing to take the text of the world and read all of it as a story of God's hope and promise, especially in the backwaters, especially in places of desolation, especially in the prisons. Because it is in those little hiding places, in the billions of the most ordinary stories, including our own, who don't make it on the news, where God is being revealed to us. Can we see it?
Besides